The sword spirit shouted loudly and called out to Teo, who was still asleep. Teo sleepily asked him to wait another 5 minutes. The sword spirit was angry at this request and expressed disbelief that he dared to ask for more time. He said that the old man, truer than the sword saint, was probably already on the 10th floor, and Teo was still dozing. Seeing that he had covered himself with a pillow, the sword spirit announced that he would sing the song of his homeland. He boasted that his song could burst the eardrums of 30 people at once. A frustrated Teo finally got up and asked what time it was. He showed him his cell phone and said it was 4 a.m. The sword spirit cleared his throat and said that it was 4 in the morning and the insects had already started crawling, implying that Teo, who was weaker than the insects, should have woken up earlier. Teo countered that the spirit was just bored with sleep. The sword spirit flinched upon hearing this, but Teo continued, saying that he always wondered why the one got up at 4 in the morning to train. He said humorously. It wasn't because he was a hard worker, but because he was incredibly loud. The sword spirit admitted that Teo was right when he said he woke him up out of boredom. The sword spirit said that Teo should be grateful to him for giving him a chance to wake up and train. The sword spirit asked to be thanked and told him to bow and praise him. Teo responded by saying that he wanted to kill the sword spirit. The sword spirit smirked and confidently stated that he was already dead and Teo wouldn't be able to kill him. He wryly said that if Teo was jealous, he'd better die himself, but soon added that he couldn't die even if he wanted to and called him a little zombie. From then on, the sword spirit began playfully calling him Theo Zombie. The one looked at the sword spirit disappointedly and muttered irritably. When he went out for his morning run, the sword spirit interrupted him again. Calling him Zombie Teo, the sword spirit emphasized that he was only gaining determination. Normally, a sword spirit would prefer to teach from the beginning, but in his case, he felt that he hadn't even started yet. Meanwhile, Teo reflected on the 4 days that had passed since he had received the sword master skill from the Holy Sword. He had killed the Flame Emperor and avoided encounters with the Holy Sword. The sword spirit, who was observing Teo's abilities, realized that he possessed the power of infinite void, which seemed incredibly cool to him, and expressed his jealousy. Teo got tired of running and asked the sword spirit not to bother him anymore. However, the sword spirit intervened, saying that Teo needed special training and jokingly mentioned the high registration fee. He then jokingly suggested that they go and win the lottery. In the tower there was a guild called Trade Guild, whose official name was Alliance. The head of the guild held the title of third-class hunter and called herself Countess. The Countess possessed a unique skill that allowed her to trade goods from the outside world. This powerful skill gave the merchant corps a complete monopoly on the tower, making it the only place to buy lottery tickets in Babylon. When they arrived at the trading company, an employee in a cat hat greeted them cordially and asked how he could help. Teo handed him a lottery ticket and told him he was here to claim his prize. The staff checked the tickets and excitedly told Teo that he had won the trading company troop lottery and congratulated him. Curious, the sword spirit asked Teo about the employee who always wore a hat with cat ears. Teo explained that he had heard that the head of the guild was a cat lover. The sword spirit jokingly said that, although he loved cats, he would have to be a very twisted person to make an ordinary person wear cat ears. The employee told Teo that the ticket could not be redeemed for 2 years from the date of purchase. Teo assured the employee that the ticket had been purchased last week. He thought he should win the lottery at least once because the spirit had mentioned the need for money. The employee smiled and said he needed a check. However, as soon as he saw the ticket, he was shocked and exclaimed that it was the first prize. The sword spirit excitedly noted how easy it was to make money. The employee checked the room and asked for time to bring his boss in. Teo agreed and advised the employee to take his time. The sword spirit warned of the possibility of being ambushed in questionable places. Teo replied, remembering how the Flame Emperor had used his power to win the lottery. If someone tries to hide it, they won't succeed. Therefore, it's safer to publicize the winnings. If the winner was killed, it would greatly affect the reputation of the trade organization. The director arrived, greeted the group, and thanked them for their patience. He introduced himself as the safety guardian and asked to be addressed as such. Teo reacted to the introduction and realized that the nickname of the headmaster was very fitting for the guild. Teo realized that the fact that the headmaster had a nickname meant that he must be a hunter of at least rank 300 plus. The warden grinned, admitted that he was often told similar things, and invited Teo upstairs. Normally, Teo didn't think he could challenge someone in charge, but not today. After receiving 50,000 gold, he had regained his confidence. Seeing the happy expression on Teo's face, the sword spirit commented on his easy, disposable happiness, saying that Teo had never been treated so well before. The sword spirit remembered how happy he had been when he told him that he had a talent for dying. A nervous Teo ordered the spirit of the sword to be silent. The spirit advised Teo not to give in so easily and counseled him to believe that the world existed to sustain his existence. The supervisor looked at Teo and asked if he wasn't feeling well. Teo quickly dismissed this concern, saying that he was just thinking about his own thoughts. The supervisor expressed relief, noting that Teo hadn't shown up earlier and concerned that he'd crossed the line. Teo had no way of knowing if the boss was an angel, but the sword spirit watched Teo's actions and noted how easily doubt could be planted on him. The supervisor led him to a door explaining that this was the VIP lounge. Opening the door, he revealed the first-place prize that Teo had won, 53,000 gold pieces. Teo was shocked to look at the gold and realize that in his homeland it equaled about $5 million. With that kind of money, he could live like a king. He thought about it. If he had aspired to success, he would have realized his dream by now. The boss offered him a choice: either take all the money or keep it in the safe of the trade troupe. Teo pondered his decision, thinking about his goal to conquer the tower and reach the top as a hunter. He realized that money was just a means to an end, and he had already seen a more enticing golden light than gold coins. Teo decided to leave the money with the trade troupe. His boss praised him for making the right decision, saying that he had personally recommended this option to the laureates. He explained the potential risks involved in getting that much money in front of bad people. However, Teo interrupted him with a smile and expressed his desire to purchase an honorary guild membership. He asked if it was worth 10,000 gold for a second-level honorary membership and offered to pay immediately. The boss was surprised and asked if Teo was in any other guild, to which Teo assured him that he was not. The spirit praised Teo's intelligence, noting that a guild was more than just a friendly group of hunters. He explained that one of the main reasons hunters joined guilds was for protection, and Teo understood that. Teo thought of the lawlessness in the city, where relying only on the guild and a group of hunters was not enough. He thought about the Flame Emperor and the Sword Saint, realizing that they were able to kill him without repercussions. The Flame Emperor never belonged to guilds and lived by pride alone. Although he won the lottery twice, he probably never paid money for protection. He rejected all guilds, turned the leading guilds against him, and eventually faced the threat of poisoning. Realizing how important it was to not make enemies in the leading guilds, Teo decided not to pursue him. He then explained that he was currently living in a cheap one-room room and asked if the guild could find him another place to live. He also asked that if any newspaper inquired as to the identity of the winner of the first raffle prize, the manager informed them that he was an honorary member of the Chamber of Commerce. Hearing the thoroughness with which Teo had approached the matter, the director's face hardened, and he realized that Teo had been very careful. The spirit of the sword told Teo that the boss's original plan to treat him like an idiot had failed. Teo replied to the superior. The warden agreed. The sword spirit teased Teo. He said that Teo was doing fine on his own and no longer needed to be treated like a child. Teo denied that the sword spirit would be more tolerant if Teo pointed out that he looked happy. Teo confirmed this and said that this was just the beginning. He said that after 4,000 deaths and 4,000 comebacks, it was a special privilege that he didn't take advantage of because of his obsession with revenge. He stated that it was time to savor his new success. The sword spirit recalled a previous conversation with Teo about the importance of tuition and noted that he had the means to do so. When asked what he needed next, Teo recommended an experienced teacher. Teo thought that the sword spirit had no need to be ashamed. The spirit continued and emphasized that he now needed a textbook. He compared it to some kind of elixir that could improve his physical abilities, or a scroll containing the principles of martial arts. However, given Teo's current level, he decided that he wouldn't be able to understand even secret martial arts books and recommended that he purchase a high-end elixir instead. The sword spirit referred to a guild called the House of the Alchemist, where skilled doctors and pharmacists work, and spirits who find an elixir created by the best craftsmen in that guild also said he knew a store where they might have what they needed. Teo expressed concern about the high cost of elixirs, and the sword spirit confirmed that they were indeed very expensive. The spirit whispered the approximate price in his ear, and a shocked expression appeared on his face. Realizing that even with all his remaining assets, he could only buy a few elixirs, Teo became worried. The sword spirit mocked and mentioned the possibility of getting a bulk discount on 5 bottles. Teo reluctantly agreed to follow him, but asked to go slower. Suddenly, the spirit stopped abruptly, and Teo questioned the sudden change of pace. The spirit gave him a serious look, told him to hide, and admitted that he had forgotten to say something important. The spirit came out from around the corner and, noticing Saint Sword approaching, informed them that the store they were heading to was Saint Sword's favorite store. Teo, disappointed that the spirit had only informed him now. The sword saint glanced toward the trash can Teo was hiding behind, making him cover his mouth anxiously, worried about being spotted. Fortunately, the sword saint turned and walked away. After he left, Teo expressed his disappointment at having to hide behind a trash can. The mecha saint realized the gravity of the situation and realized that if the old man was there, he must have bought the elixir as well. The spirit urgently summoned Teo and they ran together. When they saw the sword saint enter the store, the spirit complained that they were a step behind and wondered what they should do. Teo thought it was too dangerous to enter the same store with the sword saint. He then checked the rankings on his phone but couldn't find what he was looking for in the top 20 rankings or even the top 100. Even when he expanded the search range to the top 300, he still couldn't find anything. The spirit asked what he meant, and Teo smiled and explained that they might not have to spend as much as they expected. He claimed to know an excellent pharmacist who was able to offer them elixirs of the highest quality for a small amount of money. When Teo and Spirit entered a poor neighborhood, they attracted the attention of some people who turned out to be gangsters. The spirit expressed doubt that a talented pharmacist would live in such a place, but Teo insisted that a pharmacist was not only talented, but brilliant. The spirit was shocked and puzzled as to why a genius would live in such an area. Teo replied that if he didn't want to, the spirit might not believe it. Meanwhile, Teo noticed the people around him, noticed that they were following him, probably trying to rob him. He figured they probably thought he was crazy for talking to himself, but he wondered what their reaction would be if they found out about the money he had in his pocket. At that moment, they heard a voice pleading with him not to touch the lab equipment. The others answered in the negative, and Teo looked ahead and confirmed that they had arrived at the right place. The situation changed when the man demanded payment for overdue fees and threatened to rob the equipment for the experiment. The green-haired girl asked not to hand everything over to the pawn shop because she would not be able to earn a living. The moneylender was stubborn and ordered his men to take everything. The green-haired girl, desperate, asked for only a week or 5 days, explaining that the panacea was not yet ready. The man pulling the cart expressed frustration, pushed the cart back and knocked the girl over. He advised her not to make drugs again. As the girl sat on the ground, people watching her began to discuss the situation. Some pointed to the collapse of her business and said they had expected it. Others criticized her for not taking the business world seriously at her young age. The high price of her healing potions was also discussed. In response, the green-haired girl felt that the quality of her medicines justified their cost, and that they could not be found anywhere else in Babylon of the same quality, and that she was sorry she was doing business in such a horrible city. As people began to disperse, the green-haired girl tried to convince them to buy at least a bottle of her special healing potion. Meanwhile, the spirit looked at Theo with an incredulous look. He wondered if the loser they were facing was really the best pharmacist of all time that Theo had mentioned. Teo approached the crying green-haired girl and asked if she was still in business. When she looked at Teo, he said he wanted to place an order. Teo recognized her as the alchemist who had risen to the top 5 rankings and became the guild leader of the House of Alchemy Guild. The alchemist was shocked by Teo's order and demanded an explanation as to why the order was so large. Teo carelessly said 20,000 gold coins. She was stunned, but Teo urged her to fulfill the order. He saw the potential to connect with her before she was even ranked, and he decided to become a loyal customer until the end. She opened her lab door and said it was a disorganized and messy space. Meanwhile, the spirit expressed concern to Teo about taking the elixir created by the alchemist in such an environment. The alchemist clarified to Teo whether he had indeed ordered it for 20,000 gold. If she doubted his reliability, Teo offered to pay her up front in advance, but she said that wasn't necessary. But if possible, she would like to be paid first. Teo thought to himself that if she couldn't show even basic courtesy, her financial situation must be dire. He told her to withdraw as much money as she needed from his account and assured her that he would inform the party in advance, but told her that he wanted her to stick to a budget of around $20,000 as his funds were not limitless. When the alchemist asked what kind of elixir he wanted, she added that she would refuse if it contained drugs. Teo praised her beliefs, noting that her simple but strong beliefs had led to her becoming such a genius. Teo assured her that it wasn't some drug he'd asked for. Interested, she asked about the details of the order. The spirit told the formula and repeated the words to the alchemist, who listed the liver of a rabbit, the eyes of a magic cat, the skin of a huge desert snake, and the tail of a green salamander. She confirmed that there were a total of 23 ingredients in the formula. The spirit confirmed to Teo that those were indeed all the materials. Teo then confirmed that his understanding was correct. Spirit was surprised when she said that the blended ingredients greatly improved reflexes and was a high-quality formula. She explained that the ingredients were not refined one at a time, but immediately stewed together. The spirit wanted to ask how she knew this, but Teo interrupted him and confirmed the alchemist's explanation. She smiled and continued her explanation. She said that the ingredients usually contained a small amount of poison, and one way to neutralize it was to take the other ingredients she listed. However, depending on how they are purified, there can be different side effects. One effect is to stimulate the basic metabolism. Teo interrupted her explanation and asked how many days it would take to make the elixir. She replied 4 days, explaining that under normal circumstances it could be done faster, but that it would require new tools. Teo remembered the time when people waited at the alchemist's door for a year and had her brew potions. He smiled and said that 4 days was a steal. When they left the alchemist's store, the spirit was dissatisfied with her and doubted her abilities. He thought that most people who talked a lot were crooks, and that Teo had wasted his money. Teo asked the spirit where he had learned the formula, to which the spirit replied that he had created it himself by using various poisons. Teo noted that the alchemist had praised the formula and immediately realized its true potential, urging the spirit to give it some credence. He also mentioned that despite her current appearance, she would be the most powerful person in the alchemical world in 10 years. However, Spirit averted his gaze and remained skeptical, believing that she would take their money and run away. 4 days later, Teo and Spirit were sitting in a chair in a hotel room. The alchemist had brought 3 boxes. She explained that it had taken longer than expected to combine the different materials and apologized for the delay. Teo reassured her, said it was fine, and reminded her that he had originally said it would take 4 days. The alchemist then handed him the boxes and explained that each box contained 30 bottles, enough for at least 30 days. Teo realized the value of his investment and thought that the store was 15 times more efficient than the ones the spirit knew. The spirit noticed Teo's thoughts and asked if he was scolding himself for his own ideas. Feeling a little awkward, the alchemist asked why Teo had made such an expensive request of a nameless apothecary like her, even though she could understand and compose formulas that only a few people in Babylon could accurately do. Teo believed that it was because she was a genius of her time that he had entrusted the apothecary before him with a costly errand. But there was another reason. He remembered that she had been the first to rush to the capital when it was burning and see who the Flame Emperor was. She had skill, kindness, and the ability to understand people. It would be a great loss not to get close to someone like her. Teo said he had helped her because she seemed kind to him. He believed that not only crazy psychopaths could succeed, but also good hunters like them, so that they could support each other in the future. He held out his hand and expressed his opinion sincerely. She agreed with him and shook his hand. He said that in order to change the world, he must first succeed. As she left, she told Teo that if he had any questions, he could call her any time. Teo smiled and thanked her. The spirit moved closer to his ear and questioned his words about good hunters like us. Teo recognized that he might have said something awkward and suggested that he start practicing instead. When Teo arrived at the hunting grounds on the 3rd floor, he was greeted by orcs and goblins. After defeating the monsters, he wondered what to do next. The spirit advised him to take the elixir first. Teo followed the advice, and the taste was surprisingly ordinary, smelling of lemon and honey. However, he suddenly felt a sharp pain and noticed that something else was going on. The spirit grinned and praised the apothecary's skill, implying that the elixir had worked as it should. Teo felt a splitting headache, but the spirit explained that the elixir dulled his current perception and gave him more time to react. Teo could clearly feel the sweat dripping down his face. Confused, he asked what the spirit was talking about. The spirit indicated that his aura was moving in his heart. It formed inside the body of every hunter who entered the tower, but many lived their normal lives without realizing its presence. The spirit emphasized that proper control of his aura would improve the outcome of the battle. Teo covered his ears with his hands and tried to cope with the sensations overwhelming him. The spirit grinned and said that you could usually feel the aura flow. If you meditate, you can feel the aura flow. He said that Teo's body must suffer for his lack of talent. When the orcs attacked from behind, the spirit urged him to run away if he didn't want to get injured. Dodging the orcs' attack, Teo expressed his displeasure, calling the spirit a cursed ghost. In response, the spirit smiled and ignored Teo's words, saying that he wouldn't listen to someone who didn't even know how to use his aura. The spirit continued to taunt Teo and advised him to kill himself if he didn't like the situation. He hinted that the old man, the sword saint, would thank him if the number of murders increased. Despite feeling the slowness of the orcs' attacks, Teo realized that his body wasn't reacting to them the way he expected. A spirit appeared next to him and cheered him up. Orcs have a simple attack pattern that can be spotted and dodged. He told Teo to charge his aura at his feet. Teo didn't immediately understand how to carry out the spirit's advice. However, he was determined to repel the attack. He concentrated on charging his legs with his aura and felt the aura connect with his legs. Teo realized what he had done. The spirit pointed out that it was more complicated than Teo had realized. He compared Teo's body to a trail in the jungle, emphasizing that the trail had to be as wide as a highway to use the aura effectively. The spirit reminded Teo that it was because of the elixir that he could feel the power of the aura. He could feel the power of the aura thanks to the elixir, but without the elixir, he had no chance of winning. Teo successfully dodged the orc's attack and asked what would happen when his path turned into a highway. He let the aura flow through him and tried to overcome the obstacles within himself. He wondered what would happen if he could make that breakthrough. The spirit answered Teo, remembering how the sword saint had helplessly chopped off his head. Teo recognized that memory. The sword saint's attack was just a sidekick. The spirit said that the old man still had a long way to go, but compared to him, he was nothing. When the orc attacked Teo from behind, he managed to dodge his attack. Teo then drew his sword and connected his aura to his legs, allowing him to leap towards the orc. He swung his sword and plunged it into the orc's chest. The spirit had warned him to be on guard, for orcs had thick skin. He advised him to concentrate his aura on the tip of the blade, but Teo found that too difficult. Nevertheless, he advised him to focus all of his aura on the tip of the knife. Pouring his aura onto the tip of the knife, Teo shouted, "Die!" and the orc's green blood splattered onto the ground. The spirit asked Teo if he was okay. He was in pain. The spirit mocked Teo and said that the pain was the result of using the aura when the path didn't exist. Teo mocked the spirit, saying that his weakened body was on the verge of death and that he deserved it by killing one orc. Teo looked at the spirit and called him a bastard in response to the barb. However, the spirit smiled when Teo flexed his aura like a spring. The spirit emphasized that hunters should fight with their heads. Teo expressed his reluctance to heed the spirit's words. The spirit asked him if he was in so much pain that he wanted to die. Teo didn't know what to answer, and the spirit advised him to die because it would be better from here. Teo looked at the spirit in confusion. The spirit had recommended this method of training to Teo because of his ability to regress. Even the sword saint had said that after taking the elixir, he simply meditated and didn't overwork his body as recklessly as Teo did. Teo pondered the meaning of the spirit's words. The spirit emphasized that it was because of his regression skills that Teo was able to return after death. The spirit envied Teo's ability to endure harsh training and not injure his body. Teo suggested that killing himself should increase the number of kills, but suggested a way to prevent the number of kills from increasing. Suddenly, a huge orc appeared behind Teo. The spirit said that since he had already tasted the taste of using the aura, 100 deaths would be enough. He compared 100 deaths to a journey of 1,000 miles starting with a single step. When the orc pointed his weapon at Teo, the spirit suggested starting with death number 1, and he got the message that they were dead. Teo placed a hand on his forehead, feeling the pain throbbing in his head. The spirit looked ahead and was puzzled as to what was going on. Teo looked at him and asked if the spirit had arrived there as well. He explained that he had stayed in this place, which he now called the underworld, for some time after his death. He said that he always hears the words that he can return for 24 hours, but the rest of the time he can copy techniques. Suddenly, a message appeared in front of him saying that his death had fulfilled the skill requirement. It said that he could randomly copy the orc monster's skills. Both Teo and the spirit were surprised by this message. Teo exclaimed, not believing that the monster had a technique. The spirit was thrilled that the technique was incredibly powerful. Another message appeared, asking him to choose a skill card. The spirit shouted that he needed a skill as well. The spirit was furious and shouted that he wanted to know who was in charge of the tower. He couldn't understand why such a valuable skill went to a newbie like Teo and not an experienced hunter like himself. He considered it a disgrace to the hunting culture. Teo, on the other hand, thought about the skill, realizing that it belonged to a monster. He reached out his hand for one of the cards and decided to pick one to start with. Interested in Teo's choice, the spirit asked why he chose that particular card. Teo replied curtly that all the cards were equally unimpressive, so it didn't matter which one he chose. To Teo, it looked like a game of luck. The spirit wondered why Teo couldn't figure out which technique was better. Annoyed, Teo replied that all cards look the same if you look at them from the back. Without looking at them from the front, it's impossible to tell which one is better. The spirit casually said he could see the front of the map. Teo was stunned and realized that he could only see the back of the map because the map was moving. However, Spirit could move as he wished and see the front of the map. Suddenly, in a burst of joy, Teo screamed. The spirit was infuriated by this outburst of anger and questioned Teo's sanity and why he was screaming. Teo, wanting to continue, called out to the spirit to reveal the technique he had just seen. The spirit reluctantly agreed to read the information about the technique on the card. He warned Teo to be careful, as he would only read it once. The first map depicted orcs and their ability to overcome the challenges of nature by maximizing their fertility. The map stated that orcs had always been hidden from many races. It stated that this skill had a low F rank. However, the skill had its own disadvantages. The second card had a unique description that emphasized its interesting nature. The technique and its rank was as follows, F. However, the corresponding flaws were unknown. Teo was stunned by the absurd skill information. The spirit noticed that if he hadn't intervened, Teo would have chosen the second card. He assumed that Teo, being a man, must have mastered the power of orcs at least once. Teo couldn't believe his ears and doubted that the spirit was serious. In his opinion, both techniques were useless, but if he had to choose between them, he would lean towards the second one. The spirit noticed the discrepancy between Teo's thoughts and words and expressed concern, but confidently said that Teo's thoughts were correct and that the second skill was superior to the first. The agitated spirit asked for time to think, but Teo haughtily stated that the spirit was thinking what he was thinking. Before the spirit could respond, Teo grabbed the card and displayed a message that the skill had been selected and copied. The spirit was overcome with despair and realized that Teo had finally made his decision. Upon waking up in his new home, Teo was informed that his true hunter rank is F and there is no skill penalty. Teo rejoiced and expressed his satisfaction at having refreshed his body and mind in a comfortable environment. The spirit, realizing that Teo had not fallen for his tricks, became angry and cried in despair. Teo wondered who would agree to choose the skill Blessing of the Breed, and urged him to stop being annoyed about the spirit and focus on hunting. He was currently a rank F hunter, and all of his skill slots were filled. And he had 4 skills. Teo was satisfied with his skills and stated that he had no problems. Upon reflection, the spirit advised Teo to practice meditation to avoid the deadly pain. He advised him to sit down, cross his legs, and concentrate on practicing his aura for 6 months. He walked to the gate and told him to go to the hunting ground on the 3rd floor. The spirit repeated its question, wondering if Teo could hear it. Teo drank the elixir and turned to the Sword Emperor. Confused, Spirit asked what Teo meant by asking if he wanted to take the lotus pose. Teo noted that the spirit calls him Zombie when he is winning and Teo when he is losing. Lately, he said, the spirit has started calling him only Teo. With a friendly gesture, he warned the spirit to correct this habit. Teo attacked the orc and noticed that, as before, the orc could see his movements. The orc pounced on Teo and roared. In response, Teo activated his skill. The orc was confused and stopped attacking. When Teo repeated the skill, the orc's eyes filled with joy. Seizing the opportunity, Teo quickly swung his sword and cut off the orc's head in one motion. Strike. The defeated orc fell to the ground. Teo was pleased with this result and cried out in relief. The spirit became angry and began to berate Teo, accusing him of deceiving and ignoring the feelings of the orcs. He criticized people like Teo for making people suffer. Teo ignored the spirit's words and smiled widely. He lamented the tower's decision, perplexed as to why such a powerful skill had been bestowed upon such a deceitful man as Teo. Teo urged the spirit to stop complaining and sweating and continue on his way. He then advised him to go up to the 4th floor. A week later, Teo met the Orc King, the boss of the 5th floor. The Orc King looked at Teo curiously, and when Teo opened his eyes, there was a message to activate the Orc High Society Rank F skill. Teo shouted something in the Orc language and lunged at the king. The king was stunned to realize that someone other than himself could speak the king's language perfectly. When Teo defeated the king, he said goodbye to the great king and recognized that he was the most formidable opponent he had faced in the last week. The spirit scratched behind his ear and said sarcastically that Teo was worried about killing the monster. It was sarcasm, Teo exclaimed disappointedly, but he wanted to be sentimental for a while. After all, he had only hunted the king for 6 coins. Spirit defended his previous statements. He emphasized that the fight was not an honorable fight. Teo explained that it was a legitimate fight because it used a skill that could be obtained for 5 life coins. The information about the skill showed that it is a rank F skill. This skill originated from the great king who once invented the Supreme Association. Noting the uncultured nature of the orcs, he decided to abandon their traditional language and speak a language that better reflected their royal nature. However, this change caused a negative reaction in the tribe. Teo expressed the opinion that the orcs spent too much time on unimportant details. The spirit remarked that this was typical of orcs and added that humans were not much different. Confused, Teo questioned the spirit's words, but the spirit kicked him away, saying he was talking to himself. Teo tried to find out what the sword spirit wanted to say. His attention was distracted by a message that appeared in front of him. The message said that his existence had become clearer and more reasonable. Teo's aura enveloped him, and he thought it had finally happened. Another notification followed. The skill slots had expanded, and his hunter rank was now Class E. The spirit looked at Teo and was confused, wondering if the effect was fireworks or blood. Teo decided it was just a level-up effect. The spirit explained that the type of aura a hunter has depends on the effect it shows when they level up. For example, Flame Emperor Teo, whose aura type was probably fiery due to the nature of his abilities, was killed. The shape of the aura is usually influenced by vivid events, scenes, or things that have had a significant impact on the hunter's life, sometimes even involving trauma or unconsciousness. Then the spirit replied that the aura type was fire or blood. When Teo asked about the aura of the sacred sword, the spirit said that the aura type of the sacred sword was moonlight. When Mecha Saint was a boy, he once got lost in the mountains and was mesmerized by the beauty of a powerful shining moon. It was not his own. This experience made him embrace the idea of living with what he was given, shining like moonlight. He had held this belief since he was a 12-year-old boy. Teo believed that the spirit was also abnormal in its own way. Spirit then pointed out that now that they had cleared the 5th floor, they should move towards the 6th floor. However, Teo suggested that they skip those floors and go straight to the 10th floor boss. The spirit was surprised. He wondered if Teo was beginning to overestimate himself. He warned about the number of experienced hunters who had died on the 10th floor. However, Teo confidently stated that if he couldn't get past the 10th floor on 2 tries, he would start calling the spirit his master. The spirit began to taunt him, saying that he had spent 6 coins to defeat the orc boss, and he only had 2 left on the 10th floor, meaning easy victory. However, Teo added that he had one condition. Smiling, the spirit accepted Teo's request and agreed to reveal the techniques of the 10th floor boss. Teo added that if he won, the spirit should call him Teo and tell him the techniques of the 10th floor boss and be as polite as possible. However, Teo noticed a strange expression on the spirit's face. Excited by the challenge, the spirit announced that Teo would fall to the 10th floor and serve his master until he died. He then laughed at Teo's inability to die and said that he would have to get used to the concept of a master. He is fearless. In response, Teo asked the spirit if he had the skill to deceive him and confidently told him to prepare to serve Teo. The onlookers saw Teo standing alone and laughing, a rather unusual sight. A few onlookers said he must have gone mad. When Teo and the spirit reached the gate on the 10th floor, the guard told them that Teo was not allowed on that floor. When Teo asked why, the guard said that hunting alone on that floor was considered suicide. The guard asked Teo if he had heard the news that the guild had organized an elite team of 34 and had failed. Teo replied that the law allowed any hunter who was willing to try to hunt. The guard explained that he was obliged to keep a record of all hunters coming in and out and that the inspector would check the records later. He didn't want to let in a man who was likely to die and asked Teo to understand his position. This was because the concept of inspector was unfamiliar in his world. Teo pondered his options, wondering what to do in the current situation. The spirit suggested defeating the guards and going inside anyway. But Teo had another idea. He approached the guard and realized the difficulty of his situation. He looked determined and admitted that he really wanted to commit suicide. Both the guards and the spirit were stunned by this fact. His beloved had died a year ago, and recently the Ministry of Alchemy had diagnosed him with an incurable disease. He only had 6 months to live, but he couldn't live without his beloved. Despite his illness, as a hunter, he expressed his desire to challenge the monsters in his final days rather than waiting to die in a hospital room. Tears welled up in the eyes of the guards, touched by Teo's story. Teo handed him a red bag and explained that it was the money he was saving to pay for his hospitalization. The guard was hesitant to accept the money, but Teo said that he wanted to leave this world with nothing because he wouldn't be able to spend it anyway. He then asked them not to record his admission to the hospital, as he believed it was his last wish as a hunter. The guards, touched by Teo's sincere attitude, understood his request and allowed him to enter. He promised not to report that Teo had entered the hall. Spirit, meanwhile, was watching all this and wryly remarked that it all looked like they were making a movie. Determined to leave behind a legacy superior to that of the Flame Emperor, Teo entered the villa on the 10th floor. When he opened the door, he saw a multitude of little laughing dolls. The whole room began to burn, and the dolls invited him to join them. They invited him to play hide and seek. The dolls looked excited and invited Teo to join the game. He then received a message that he had reached the boss stage and was informed that the opponent was a lonely man named Teo. He accepted the dolls' invitation and confidently agreed to play with them together. The guild that had been the strongest guild since the opening of the tower suffered its 30th defeat today. The reporters asked the guild leader, Black Witch, about the reason for the failure. The Black Witch confidently stated that they had no skill deficiency and that their failure was due to simple bad luck. However, after successfully traversing the 10th floor, the Flame Emperor began to doubt their confidence. He said that luck was part of their abilities and called this group losers. Teo thought deeply, anticipating that this interview would be remembered as a show of weakness in the future. Why was it that, out of all the hunters, only the Flame Emperor was able to conquer the 10th floor? At that moment, Teo received a message that he had entered the boss stage. The boss on the 10th floor turned out to be the Flame Maiden. The dolls teased Teo, inviting him to play with them and convincing him to find a real one. The task of clearing the 10th floor was simple. The only real doll hidden in the mansion had to be found and destroyed. The spirit warned him about the flames, explaining that they were no ordinary flames, but an aura full of hellfire. Teo realized that even with the protective aura barrier, any human wouldn't be able to last more than 10 minutes in this flame. However, for hunters using the flame aura, the impact is greatly reduced. A disappointed Teo exclaimed that it was this advantage that allowed the Flame Emperor to successfully clear the area. He then expressed his dissatisfaction with the Flame Emperor's behavior. The spirit objected that luck was part of his ability, calling Teo a person who relies on luck and a zombie. He called him a zombie. The dolls started singing a hide-and-seek song, which made things even worse for Teo. He tried desperately to protect himself from the flames and expressed bewilderment at the claims that he relied on luck to survive. He emphasized that it was difficult for him to resist using his aura. The spirit replied, stating that despite Teo's efforts, his aura would reach its limit in about a minute. The spirit mentioned the holy sword that had withstood the flames for 30 minutes and waited for an opportunity for over an hour. The spirit noted that Teo had invaded impulsively, without proper preparation. Teo sarcastically thanked the spirit for the information. The spirit asked what he was going to do with the 2 coins. Teo replied that he would think about it after he died. The spirit chuckled and commented on Teo's expectation that his aura would suddenly and dramatically expand upon his death. The spirit explained that there were 2 ways to clear the area. Either find a real doll with little chance, or have enough aura skills to withstand the flames until you find a real doll. However, Teo foolishly bet 2 coins. Teo smiled and said confidently that the spirit only knew half the situation. He said he would see who would win when he survived death. Teo estimated that he had about 10 seconds left before his aura was depleted. He thought about grabbing a doll at random. One of the dolls turned to him and asked if he wanted to play with it. He placed his hand on the doll's head. However, the doll's mouth opened, and it was clear that his choice was wrong. As Teo's time was coming to an end, he expressed his disappointment with the design of the boss scene. The spirit told him that it was useless to try to understand Tower's intentions, since Tower was a twisted psychopath who bestowed broken skills on lazy people like Teo. Teo glanced at the spirit, intending to comment on his words, but before he could finish, his aura reached its limit and he was engulfed in flames. The spirit taunted Teo, declaring that his time was up and cursing him as a masochist who outdid even the Tower. Teo was engulfed in flames and desperately wished for a quick death. The spirit laughed at Teo's painful cries and emphasized his masochistic nature by agreeing to Teo being burned alive. Suddenly there was a message saying that he had died and that the skill requirements had been met. Another message said that he would randomly copy the skills of the Flame Maiden monster. Teo looked at the spirit and remembered his promise. The spirit looked over the skill map and assured Teo that he hadn't forgotten and that he wasn't the kind of limited person who didn't keep promises. He pointed to the golden skill card and said that he had hit the jackpot. It turned out to be a rank S skill. It uses resentment and anger to burn away all unresolved grudges, unheard voices, and unfulfilled hopes. Can generate a fire aura within a 2-kilometer radius, but it doesn't activate unless inside a barrier. The spirit insisted on choosing this particular skill. He emphasized the power of a rank S skill and imagined that he could unleash hellfire at will. However, Spirit noticed the change in Teo's facial expression and asked what was bothering him and what he was thinking about. Teo looked worried and admitted that something was bothering him, though he couldn't explain why. He knew for a fact that this technique was very powerful, but he wondered what caused such anxiety. He asked the spirit to read the other skills as well. Reluctantly, the spirit began to list the names of the skills. Rank A Maze Planning, Rank B Puppet Control, Rank B Remote Control, and Rank C Trap Setting. Teo looked at the last skill card in shock, and Spirit's face contorted in annoyance. Teo smiled and said confidently that he already knew what it was. The spirit tried to interject with concern, but Teo assured him that it was okay. He already had an idea of the technique. Pointing at the golden card, the spirit spoke enthusiastically about her abilities, emphasizing her charm and demonic style. However, Teo's thoughts contradicted the spirit's enthusiasm. Teo knew that this was exactly the card he needed. Teo explained that something had been wrong from the beginning. The real doll had a fire aura that kept it from burning, but the fake doll remained unharmed. Teo decided that there was only one answer to this riddle. When Teo picked up the selected card, the skill information appeared on the screen. This skill is rank A and prevents the specified target from being set on fire. This skill provides a safe life free from the fear of fire. Teo realized that the skill allowed him to choose an object that would not burn. The spirit expressed disappointment that it was a terrible gamble. However, Teo laughed and asked the spirit to call him Sir Teo. Another message appeared, announcing Teo's death and pushing the timeline back 24 hours. His current hunter rank is E. Teo expressed confidence in his new skills and the joy of being able to go back and explore the complex in search of real dolls without any worries. However, his satisfaction was short-lived as he suddenly received a message about a skill penalty. Teo soon realized that this penalty was related to injuries. Another message said that this penalty would replicate the damage of the enemy that killed him. Another report on the start of the punishment appeared, recreating the Flame Maiden's injury. A little beggar girl was so desperate for food that she went from house to house in her neighborhood, asking for even a piece of bread or leftovers. However, people rejected and criticized her. The number of orphans rasped begging in their neighborhood, and this was attributed to the ongoing famine. Some were indifferent, but the girl complained of hunger and persistently asked for food. People have commented on the situation, expressing their frustration and wishing someone would clear things up. While doing so, the beggar accidentally bumped into a man. He took pity on her and asked her about her parents. He noticed that she looked exhausted and that she was in pain. With a ray of hope, he introduced himself as a doctor and invited her in. He mentioned that he had many other children who needed therapy and companionship and suggested that she watch and play with them. She stood in a cage with her hands chained together. When she was hungry, she wanted to come out and play. The gentleman watching her smugly declined her request and gave her a lecture on patience. He believed that someone who asked for food simply because he was hungry was like an animal. He finally let her out of the cage, claiming to know orphans like her. Smiling sinisterly, he accused them of spreading diseases like a virus, roaming from village to village. He claimed to be a doctor and claimed to eradicate such diseases. He demanded that she sacrifice herself. Meanwhile, other children were suffering in cages. The gentleman stated that these orphans, who were believed to be children of witches, were the cause of the famine plaguing the country. According to him, they are carrying poison and other viruses affecting the country. He promised to save the country by sacrificing them. The little helpless beggar watched her companion suffer the same fate. The people around her eagerly awaited their execution. In the cage, she pondered her master's actions, wondering why he had hurt her and wondering where her friends were. On the outside of the cage, Teo watched the scene along with the spirit. They both reacted to what was happening with shock and disbelief. Teo wondered if it was just their consciousness floating around. In this strange state, the spirit was full of anger and condemned the cruelty of sacrificing innocent children. Teo guessed that it was a copy of the Level 10 boss scene. He was amazed that this monster could have been human before. Spirit intervened and countered that not all monsters are like that. In particular, bosses are influenced by otherworldly events, such as creatures and heroes. From floor 11 onwards, this became more obvious. Teo asked why Spirit hadn't informed him earlier, to which Spirit replied that Teo hadn't asked. This was the spirit's first encounter with the original copy, and she realized how difficult it was to understand what these monsters experienced in the afterlife. The spirit was upset by this situation. Suddenly, the butler with the candle slipped and dropped it, causing a fire that quickly engulfed the mansion. Maids, butlers, and others ran out of the burning building. Teo tried to stop them and reminded them that there were children in the basement. Meanwhile, a little beggar girl facing the fire called for help, but found the heat unbearable. She walked up to the kind gentleman and flashed her a look. The young beggars thought they had done nothing wrong. They just didn't want to starve and wanted to play with their friends. They just wanted to play some more. The message appeared that the injuries had been treated and the punishment was over. Teo woke up in his bed with heavy thoughts. He was silent, not knowing how to feel about what had happened. The spirit watched him for a while before giving his opinion on the matter. The spirit recognized the sad plight of the children, but stated that there did not seem to be any acceptable solution or action to remedy the situation. Teo was stunned, disappointed, and discouraged by the spirit's response. He admitted that spirits were nonsense, but pointed out the harsh reality. The wardens had become monsters, and their first children had died long ago in another world. It had happened before Teo was even born. Even if it happened in the tower, Teo could have died countless times trying to save them. But this tragedy happened in another world, and no one could solve the problem. The spirit convinced Teo to find and kill the real dolls and continue climbing to the 11th, 20th, 30th, 40th, and 50th floors. The only way to clear his floors was to solve these problems on his own. To become the strongest hunter at the top, Teo had to solve these problems by himself. Teo thought about the Flame Emperor's way of thinking and realized that he wouldn't hesitate to quickly find and defeat a real puppet. However, he stated that he did not want to imitate the Flame Emperor's ruthless methods. He also stated that he did not want to be like him. As they approached the mansion, the spirit berated Teo. He stated to him that he refused to defeat the boss just because he didn't want to be like the Flame Emperor. The spirit emphasized that defeating the boss was necessary to clear the floor. Teo wondered who had decided he needed to kill his boss. He slammed his hand on the door, expressing disappointment and acknowledging his past stupidity. The spirit asked about his explosion, to which Teo replied that he'd been a fool and that the spirit had been a fool too. The spirit reminded him that he'd chosen the S-class. He uttered the words resentment, hostility, and revenge. Resentments that were never quelled, voices that were never heard, dreams that were never fulfilled. Burn it all away. If you wish, an aura of hellfire will descend to a 2-kilometer radius around you. No one can escape this hell without your permission. Teo questioned its strangeness. The spirit demanded an explanation from Teo, but Teo pointed to the last part of the sentence. He wondered how the guild could have survived without killing the boss. Noticing the contradiction, the sword spirit agreed with his remark. Teo opened the door, stating that there was only one possible answer. The boss had authorized the escape. Teo saw a scene that no man could have overcome. The boss wanted only one thing, to play with the dolls. The dolls saw Teo and asked him to play with them. He agreed and activated his special skill, Fire Caution. The dolls wondered why the heat didn't bother him. Teo approached one of the dolls and confirmed that they could play together. He suggested they play hide-and-seek and warned them to be careful. He showed his confidence by saying that when he was a little boy, he never lost at hide-and-seek. The dolls looked at him in surprise. When Teo closed his eyes and started counting, the dolls hurried to hide. The spirit watched Teo play hide-and-seek with the stuck children. The puppets cheered each other on, running farther away so Teo wouldn't catch them. Teo approached the dolls and claimed to have found one. However, the doll denied that it was the same one. He repeated the process with the other dolls, enjoying the play and the laughter they elicited. The spirit recognized the scene and realized it was a memorial of sorts. Teo continued playing with the dolls, but received the same response that it was not the doll he was looking for. However, as he continued to play, he eventually got to where the doll was sitting in the cage. Teo knelt down next to the cage, and the doll asked him if he wanted to play with it. Teo put his hand on the doll's head and confidently announced that he had caught it. He then informed the doll that it was their turn. The doll began to melt, expressing his gratitude. The little girl smiled and thanked him. When the doll disappears, a blessing appears on the screen, signifying the completion of normal, hidden, and boss stages.